Mistakes. We've all made them. Whether it be something small like writing down someone's name wrong, or something big like 27 counts of vehicular manslaughter, we've all fucked up at some point in our lives. But at the end of the day, even if it might feel like we've ruined everything, at least it's not the end of the world though, right? Well, that's not exactly true for the people in this video. As a wise man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. And by responsibility, I mean the lives of every single person on this planet. We as a species have the power to nuke ourselves completely to the ground, and all it takes is a very annoyed country leader and a very pressable red button. Suddenly, running someone over in my Honda Civic doesn't seem like such a big deal now, does it? Now of course, we do have failsafes in place to ensure that this doesn't happen. And they work. Most of the time. The times that they didn't work, well, judging by the fact that we're all still here and we aren't living in a Mad Max style apocalypse, or as Australia calls it, a regular Tuesday, there must have been something that ended up stopping the nukes from being launched. Well, without further ado, let's talk about the tiny mistakes that almost ended the world. The first one happened on the 25th of October 1962 in the US. A guard was doing his night shift at an Air Force base in Wisconsin when he noticed a dark figure try and climb the security fence around the base. Now this story, and many others in this video, happened right in the middle of the Cold War, where the US and the Soviet Union were swinging their nuclear-powered dicks around trying to prove the wonders of capitalism and communism, all while the rest of the world just tried their best to stay out of their way. And both countries were on super high alert, ready to completely level each other at the press of a button. So it's safe to say that a shadowy thing breaking into a top security airbase in the middle of the night would raise some eyebrows at the least. Immediately, the guard raised the alarm about the intruder. A nearby airfield received the alarm too, and they were supposed to press a button, alerting everyone of a tiny little security breach. No big deal, just a little incident that'll get resolved pretty quickly. Instead of that, they pressed another button, which just so happened to be the "holy shit, the world is ending, the day of reckoning is upon us, we are all going to die" button. It's an oddly specific button to have, but this was the Cold War, so it was a legitimate possibility. I'll give it a pass. This tiny mistake caused the entire base to go into panic mode. Just a few days ago, a spy plane had seen the Russians loading up their own nukes and missiles, so nuclear war was a legitimate possibility. And now with this alarm, that possibility became a reality. Pilots got on their planes full of nuclear bombs and started their engines, completely certain that World War III had just begun. They were about to take off when a commander at the base figured out what had happened and managed to stop them in time. Turns out, the mysterious intruder at the first airbase was just a black bear, and the whole thing was a harmless misunderstanding. Well, harmless only because of the army commander, who luckily figured out that Russia's grand plan to win the Cold War wasn't going to involve clumsily climbing over fences at 3 in the morning. At least we can rest easy at night knowing that false alarms and fake warnings are completely a thing of the past. Speaking of fake warnings, our second mistake happened on the 3rd of June 1980. As usual, the US was constantly scanning the skies for any approaching missiles, which meant that it was some poor Air Force guy's job to stare at a screen for hours at 3 AM to make sure that nothing happened. But this time, something happened. In the middle of the night, the reading on the screen went from 0 missiles incoming to 2 missiles incoming, which is about 2 missiles too many that should be approaching your country. The guy at the screen immediately called his superior and told him about the attack, who then asked him to confirm the attack. The guy looked back at his screen, but he noticed that the screen now read 220 missiles incoming. He called his superior again and told him about the now substantially bigger problem, and he now had to call the president himself and arrange an American counterattack on Russia. The missiles would reach America in minutes, so he only had a few short moments to decide whether to start a nuclear war. He prepared himself and was almost about to do this, when he got another call from the screen guy, saying that this was a false alarm. After a bit of investigating, the military found a single malfunctioning computer chip that caused the whole thing. Luckily, the guy monitoring the screen thought it was unlikely that the Russians would launch 200 nukes at the same time and stop the counterattack before it was too late. To think that if it weren't for that one guy's decision, the whole world would probably be a barren wasteland, all because of a single defective computer chip that cost 46 cents. And if you weren't already scared to sleep at night, you know what the fun part is? Equipment malfunctions and glitches like this that we have no control over happen literally all the time. Like in 1967, when the Air Force's missile detection system, which is used to detect incoming missiles, went completely dead with no explanation. The army assumed that the Soviets were responsible, and so revved up their nuclear bomb-carrying planes to get ready for an attack. But as it turns out, it wasn't the Soviets who caused the missile detection system to shut down. It was actually a solar flare. These are basically strong bursts of radiation from the sun that aren't dangerous enough to kill anyone, but they can disable satellite and radio communications for anywhere from a few minutes to an entire day, which is more than enough time for the entire human race to nuke itself out of existence. Luckily, the US had been monitoring the sun for a while now and stopped the planes before it was too late. Or how about the time in 1979? Everything was going well at the US Air Force at 3 a.m. on the 9th of November, when their missile detection system suddenly warned them of thousands of nukes from Russia coming right to the US. Instantly, the facility went into full panic mode, as you do when faced with imminent nuclear annihilation. The nuclear bombers were getting ready to take off, and it was now time for the National Security Advisor to call the president and ask him whether they should launch their own nukes or not. The president was supposed to make his decision in 5 minutes, and then they would officially declare nuclear war. But the guy in charge decided to wait for a while instead of telling the president, just to make sure that it was a real attack. Well, that turned out to be what saved us all, because 6 minutes later, they got information from their satellites that no attack was actually taking place. So what caused the false alarm? Well, it was a military training video. A technician had inserted a training videotape into the military computers, probably because he was bored at work, and when you're bored at work, the first thing you do is think of all the ways to kill off the entire human race. While he had fun watching it, this tape was also shown to the entire Defense Department, and it was apparently realistic enough to cause all that panic. So at the end of the day, the whole world almost got destroyed, but at least we know that whoever's making those training tapes definitely deserves a raise. But it wasn't just the Americans who were constantly threatening to destroy the world. The Russians had about the same number of nukes as the US, and unsurprisingly, they also had about the same number of close calls with them, like what happened on the 25th of January 1995. Now this was after the Cold War had ended, but it wasn't like the US and Russia were best friends at this point. They both still had their nukes, they both still had their missiles, and they definitely still had the mutual distrust that you can only get after 45 years of almost getting nuked. So it really wasn't the best of timings when the Russians suddenly detected a fast-moving object in the Barents Sea. This was right above the Russian coastline, and the object was apparently headed straight towards Moscow. And just in case that wasn't concerning enough, while it was flying, the object split into multiple sections, just like a nuclear missile would. So you know what they say, if it moves like a missile, splits like a missile, and is currently headed straight towards your capital city, well, you don't have much time to make a decision. The Russians immediately sent a signal to their highest level of defense, which included their president. The president had a briefcase which contained the nuclear launch codes, and this was the first time that it was ever opened. The Russians had a plan in place: detect and respond to an enemy missile in less than 10 minutes. Within 5 minutes, they had already prepared their submarines to launch their nukes and were completely ready for a counterattack. All it would take at this point was a single command for all-out nuclear war. For 4 whole minutes, they waited with their fingers right above the launch buttons, ready for a counterattack, when suddenly, the mysterious object just fell right into the ocean. Pretty shit missile, thought the Russians, as they called off their nukes and returned to normal. So what was the cause behind the incredibly missile-like object? Well, it was actually launched by the US near Russia for an experiment. Actually, that sounds pretty bad too. A group of US and Norwegian scientists wanted to study the aurora borealis, and so they launched a rocket with scientific equipment to study what was going on. Now you might think it was pretty irresponsible of the US to just launch rockets willy-nilly near their greatest enemy, and you'd be right, which is why the US actually told Russia and 30 other countries about the launch weeks ago. The only problem was, someone forgot to pass that information along to the radar crew. You know, the people whose sole job it is to look out for American missiles. After this, new rules were put in place to make sure that important news like this actually gets to the people that need to hear it, which hopefully makes this the first and last time that a country ever opens its nuclear codes. Now the last incident, and probably the most well-known, happened in Russia in 1983. This is Stanislav Petrov. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Force, and on the 26th of September, he was tasked with monitoring the skies for American missiles. All was going well, until the screen suddenly lit up, telling him that 5 American missiles were currently inbound to Russia and would reach within minutes. Petrov now had to make a decision, and he had to make it fast. If he reported the missiles, Russia would immediately launch a counterattack on the US. At this point, Russia's missile policy was just, if you see a missile, you press the button, no questions asked. And so him reporting the incident would no doubt result in all-out nuclear war. Plus, it wasn't like the US at the time weren't developing their own nukes, and they were more than capable of launching an attack. But at the last moment, Petrov decided that the missiles must be a false alarm and didn't report them. And judging by the fact that we're all still here, he was right. The missiles detected by the system were actually caused by sunlight reflecting off of a satellite at just the right angle to make it look like an attack. Petrov could have just as easily decided to report the supposed missiles, leading to a full-blown counterattack and potentially billions of lives lost. In fact, pretty much everyone in this video narrowly prevented the deaths of billions, all because they were smart or lucky enough to catch one tiny mistake. I guess that's what you gotta deal with when you give the 2 biggest middle school bullies nuclear-powered AR-15s and tell them to have fun. So yeah, those are some of the tiny mistakes in history that almost ended the world. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment, and watch another video by clicking right here. I'll see you guys later. Also, by the way, check out my Twitch. I play games on them and I'm terrible at it, but it's fun, so come join. Click the first link in the description and drop a follow. Anyway, I'll see you guys later.
I got bad